it's supposed to feel.
Everyone, and welcome to the October 2023 Ordinary Council meeting. We acknowledge and pay our respects to the traditional custodians of this land, the Whadjuk people of the Noongar Nation, and their elders past and present. I would like to advise everyone that the audio of this meeting is being live streamed to YouTube. I request everyone to please turn off your mobile phones. I remind you that the recording of the meeting proceedings and photography within the chamber is prohibited unless prior approval has been granted, and councillors and city officers are reminded to disclose any declarations of financial interests and interests affecting impartiality, and are requested to activate their microphones when addressing the meeting. So, with that, we move to item 1, which is the declaration of opening, and I declare this meeting open at 6 p.m. Item 1.1 is the election of the Deputy Mayor. And the election of the Deputy Mayor is conducted in accordance with the Local Government Act and regulations. I've received 3 nominations for the position of Deputy Mayor from Councillors Mary Choi, Glenn Cridland and Bronwyn Moore. I will now open nominations for the position of Deputy Mayor. Are there any other nominations? No. Okay. So, I will now invite each nominee for Deputy Mayor to speak for up to 4 minutes. Councillor Choi, the microphone is yours.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Firstly, congratulations to all newly elected and re-elected members to Council. I look forward to working closely with all of you, the CEO and Executive Management team, for the benefit and in the best interests of the City of South Perth District. I also look forward to continuing my work as a councillor for Mill Point Ward, a role I find very rewarding, surrounded by a wonderful South Perth community. Whilst my recent quest for Mayor did not go as hoped, I believe I acted with integrity and my drive and enthusiasm has not waned. I will carry on in my role as councillor for the district for the rest of my term, as always, professionally. I believe I have served the community well over the past 4 years on council, including being an active participant in councillor workshops and briefings and in these chambers on council deliberations and decision making. I have initiated no less than 13 motions before council to best serve the community, most of which have been gratefully endorsed by council. I have also served as a council delegate to around 8 external and voluntary committees to benefit council and the community in representation and decision making. Coupled with my proven community and council track record is my solid work ethic. I'm conscientious, diligent, prepared, and also a quick learner. And so although I have not served as a Deputy Mayor previously, given my determination and perseverance to succeed, combined with my mediation qualifications and experience, and including chairing experience, I have no doubt I'm up for the job and responsibility. I want a harmonious working relationship with all members of council, new or old, and including the re-elected Mayor. And I believe nominating myself for Deputy Mayor demonstrates this. This does not mean we'll always necessarily agree. It will be, as with all members, without fear or favour. Democracy relies on robust, respectful debate, a strong foundation of principles and ethics, that is to do the right thing for the right reasons. I will never criticise or chastise or try to influence or dissuade anybody on this council to do what they think is right in representing the people of the district. And I promise to be there for everybody, to listen and to try to understand different points of view that will arise from time to time. Most importantly, I promise to be there for the people, to help ensure their voices are heard and represented too. Whether given this opportunity tonight or not, one of the things I would like to raise as a possibility is to rotate the Deputy Mayor position from year to year between members, in order to share the role and give all members the opportunity to step up, and also to appreciate the differing positions between the presiding member role and councillor role. I'm happy to kickstart that initiative with my appointment to Deputy Mayor, if you agree. So I'll leave you with that to consider, and thank you. I hope I have your support.
Thank you, Councillor Choi. Councillor Cridland, the floor is yours for 4 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I haven't prepared anything, but that hasn't stopped me for speaking for more than 4 minutes previously, as a lot of you would know. I put myself forward with a couple of things in mind. That is, I have experience on the council. I know the way it works. I know how to preside over meetings, and I know what the mayor does, having been the deputy mayor before and having acted as mayor. It's a very different job to being a councillor, but it has significant obligations on it. Importantly, when the mayor's unable to perform their duties or is away, you have to fill in. You have to be the spokesperson for the city. You have to attend all of their meetings, and it is a significant obligation in your diary because the mayor gets invited to a hell of a lot of stuff. It also means that you've got to be able to deal with meetings, preside over meetings, and understand the people who are the councillors in your council. For those reasons, perhaps arrogantly, I know I can do the job. The question is whether or not the councillors want me, and if they don't, that's fine, but I'm simply putting myself forward in the event that they do want me to perform that role. I've heard what Councillor Choi has said about rotating the position. I have no particular ambitions, and if in a couple of years' time someone said, well, how about someone else has a go, I wouldn't be averse to the matter being raised again as well. I'm not so sure I'm keen on a you do it this year, someone else does it next year sort of arrangement. But that's it. We're all councillors, we all have the same vote, and really what we're talking about here is just organising someone dependable, reliable, who can work well with the mayor and preside over meetings and carry out those public functions in the mayor's absence. Put myself forward, and if you don't want me, I'm not offended.
Thank you, Councillor Cridland. Councillor Ward, the floor is yours for 4 minutes.
Thank you for giving me this opportunity to stand before you today as a nominee for the position of Deputy Mayor. I'm excited to share with you why I believe that I'm the right person for the job. While I might be new to council, I do bring with me a wealth of experience working with and advising local governments for the past 10 years. This experience has allowed me to witness firsthand the challenges and the opportunities that our communities face. I have worked closely with both the council and the administration, providing guidance and strategic planning to help them overcome obstacles and to achieve their goals. I am the person who is called to assist when things get tough. I understand the requirements of good governance, and I regularly present to councils on those requirements. In addition to my local government advisory experience, I've also spent 5 years serving on charitable board. This has given me experience in managing a large investment portfolio and a deeper understanding of the importance of collaboration and effective decision-making. I have learned the value of listening to different perspectives, finding common ground and working towards consensus. These skills are crucial in building strong relationships within our council and fostering a positive and productive working environment. My role as a director of a mid-sized law firm has seen me provide financial oversight, leading to a greater transparency and improving our financial performance. I also manage a team of 15 committed professionals. I'm not only a capable individual, but I'm also someone who embodies the qualities of freshness, independence, and peacemaking. I bring with me a unique perspective and a strong ability to unite people working together towards a common goal. I believe that respectful disagreements can lead to innovative solutions, and I encourage open, constructive dialogue among all individuals. In a world often divided by differences, I strive to bridge divides and foster an environment where collaboration thrives. With my fresh approach, I bring new ideas and perspectives to the table, challenging the status quo and pushing those boundaries. I'm not confined by convention, but rather I'm driven by an unwavering belief in the power of change. Independence is a core value that defines my character. I am not bound by the limits of tradition or the expectations of others. I am free to think, speak and act in ways that align with my principles and my convictions. As a peacemaker, I am committed to resolving conflicts and promoting harmony. I understand that disagreements are inevitable, but I firmly believe that they can be resolved through respectful and empathetic communication. And I aim to create an atmosphere where individuals feel heard, valued, understood, even in the midst of differing opinions. By encouraging respectful disagreements, I would like to foster an environment where diverse viewpoints can coexist and thrive to the benefit of our community, because this is our job. I want to emphasise my commitment to servant leadership. I believe that elected officials should always put the needs of the community above their own, and I am dedicated to serving the best interests of our city, working tirelessly with all of you to make it a better place for our residents. This is about ensuring that our council remains accountable to the people who we serve. So in conclusion, I'm not just a capable individual, but I'm also someone who brings freshness, independence and peacemaking skills to the table. I'm here to unite people, to encourage open and constructive dialogue, and to foster an environment where respectful disagreements lead to innovative solutions.
20 seconds left, Councillor Waugh.
Together, let us embrace our differences and work towards a common purpose. I kindly ask for your support and trust in me to fulfil this important role, and together we can level up South Perth and become a model for what good governance looks like. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Waugh. So, we have 3 nominations. The voting will be conducted by secret ballot. Ballot papers for the position of Deputy Mayor will be handed out to each elected member. Councillor voting is conducted in secret, and councillors are advised that in accordance with the recent local government reforms, elections are to be conducted by optional preferential voting, and therefore councillors have the choice to either vote for one candidate just by putting a number 1 in the box opposite the name of the candidate for whom the councillor wishes to be elected, or vote for some candidates by numbering several candidates in order of your preference, or vote for all candidates in the order of your preference. The governance staff will collect the completed ballot papers, and the CEO will count the votes on the basis of first preference votes for each nominee, and if required, the vote count will go to a second preference. So, with the assistance of governance, I invite all councillors to vote. I now declare that following secret ballot, Councillor Bronwyn Moore is elected Deputy Mayor for the City of South Perth for a 2-year term. That brings us to item 1.2 of the agenda, which is the declaration of office ceremony for the Deputy Mayor, and we'll now conduct the swearing-in ceremony for the Deputy Mayor. Oh, and Councillor Moore, if you'd like to join me at the head table there, because that's where we'll do the ceremony.
And I will duly, faithfully, honestly and with integrity fulfil the duties of the office for the people in the district according to the best of my judgment and ability. And I will observe the code of conduct adopted by the City of South Perth under section 5.104 of the Local Government Act 1985.
Congratulations, Deputy Mayor Bronwyn Moore. Okay, that brings us to item 2 of tonight's agenda, which is disclaimer. The City of South Perth disclaims any liability for any loss arising from any person or body relying on any statement, discussion, recommendation or decision made during this meeting. Item 3 is announcements from the presiding member, that's me. There's no such announcements this evening. Item 4 is attendance. Item 4.1 is apologies. There are no apologies this evening. Item 4.2 is approved leaves of absence, and there are no such approved leaves of absence for this evening. Item 5 is declarations of interest, and bear with me because there's a few to declare here. So, Mayor Greg Milner, that's me. I've declared an impartiality interest in item 10.1.1 of the agenda, as I serve on the board of Amaroo Care Services Inc. Amaroo operates in the aged care and retirement village sectors, albeit in a different catchment area. And in addition, I know people who are employed at 2 of the 3 proponents. Councillor Bronwyn Moore has declared an impartiality interest in item 10.1.1 as, to the extent that it might be considered an impartiality interest, I hereby disclose that. In 2019, I acted for a client on a matter involving the sale of their business to Amana Living. In 2019, I acted for a local government in respect to a prosecution of one member of the management team of Amana Living in respect to a breach notice, and the firm of which I am a director advised the local government in respect to a matter involving Amana Living. I have no other knowledge of the matter and did not have any involvement in any matter of advice or otherwise in respect to Amana Living. Mayor Greg Milner, that's me. I've declared an impartiality interest in item 10.1.2 as I know a number of the nominees. Councillor Mary Choi has also declared an impartiality interest in item 10.1.2 as some of the nominees are known to me. Councillor Bronwyn Moore has declared a proximity interest in item 10.3.2 as I live on Mary Street within proximity of number 45 Mary Street, Como, and I previously raised an objection to a change of use. Mayor Greg Milner, again, that's me. I've declared an impartiality interest in item 10.4.10 as I know 3 of the applicants. Councillor Mary Choi has declared an impartiality interest in item 10.4.10 as some of the applicants are known to me, and Councillor Jennifer Nafard has declared an impartiality interest in item 10.4.10 as my interests are impartial, as some of the applicants are known to me. Councillors, are there any other declarations of interests that anyone wishes to make this evening? That's a no. Okay. So we now move on to item 6, which is public question time. Item 6.1 is responses to previous public questions taken on notice. That's nil this evening. Item 6.2 is public question time. So I now open public question time at, I make it 6:29. Oh no, 6:24, I'm fast. Okay, at 6:24 p.m. We've received 2 written submissions prior to tonight's meeting, and I'd like to start by inviting Mr. Barry Drake of South Perth, if you'd love to come to the microphone, and we look forward to your questions.
My name's Barry Drake. I live at Unit 3, Number 2, Scenic Crescent, South Perth. Good evening, Mr. Mayor, councillors, officers, good evening, members of the gallery, and a special good evening to everybody out there on YouTube listening. My questions are about the underground power, South Perth and Hurlingham project area. Question 1. Were any inquiries made by you to which of your staff told me to put my tenants' rents up to pay for the underground power, which you said you doubted? Because the same response was given by one of your staff members to a prominent real estate agent who asked the same question.
Thank you for your question. Mr. Adams.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The answer to your question is no.
Thank you, Mr. Adams. Your second question, Mr. Drake?
Question number 2. You've charged the owners of blocks of flats $3,000 per dwelling unit for the undergrounding of the power lines in the South Perth and Hurlingham project area. Why then haven't you charged the granny flat owners the same $3,000 per dwelling unit?
Thank you. Mr. Adams.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think I previously answered this question, Mr. Drake, but just to reiterate, we charged people in accordance with the council resolution and based on the information provided to us by Landgate.
Thank you, Mr. Adams. And your final question, Mr. Drake?
Question number 3. In a letter to me from the Ombudsman on the 28th of August 2023, which was in reply to my letter of complaint, re the underground power charges, the Ombudsman, and this is a quote from the Ombudsman's letter to me, the City of South Perth informed this office that you lodged this matter with the State Administrative Tribunal on the 29th of November 2022. Why didn't you tell them, and that's the Ombudsman's office, that I withdrew this matter on the 9th of February 2023, 9th of February this year, I withdrew it, without it having been heard or ruled upon by the tribunal?
Thank you for your question. Mr. Adams?
Again, Mr. Drake, we previously answered this question. We have no record of providing any advice to the Ombudsman on this matter. However, I would also reiterate to you that if you wish to challenge the charges that have been imposed, the correct jurisdiction to do this is the State Administrative Tribunal.
So you're saying the Ombudsman is not
Mr.
the correct
Drake,
office to
your question has
rule
been
on this matter?
Mr. Drake, I'm speaking. You've had your question answered. And while I'm on the subject, a number of the questions that you've been asking have been answered previously. You've been coming to council meetings since March of this year and asking what is now questions that are starting to become a bit repetitive. I do have the power under the standing orders to disallow any questions that have been asked previously. I'm just giving you fair notice that I intend to start using those powers a little bit more going forwards. Thank you for your questions. And I'd now
Well,
like
Mr.
to...
Mayor,
No,
you used
Mr. Drake.
that word fair.
Mr. Drake, you've asked your questions. It's not a forum for debate. Thank you for your questions. And I'm now going to invite the next person to the microphone. And with that, Mr. Drake, no more interruptions from you, please. I'd now like to invite Mr. Trevor Wilkinson of Como, if you'd like to come to the microphone, and I understand you have a question for us.
Good evening, everyone. I have a question to the CEO, Mr. Bradford. And the question is, will you arrange and attend an on-site meeting to rectify each and every issue, some as yet not mentioned, with an inspection of one and all to give a satisfactory result? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wilkinson. Mr. Bradford?
I think the matter has been your matter that you relate to has been dealt with since 2015. Mr. Wilkinson has been adequately dealt with.
Thank you, Mr. Bradford, and thank you, Mr. Wilkinson, for your question. All righty. I'm just going to check with governance to see if there's any late questions in the tray. No, there's not. Okay, thank you. I now close public question time at 6:30 p.m. We now move on to item 7, which is confirmation of minutes and notes. Item 7.1 is minutes. Item 7.1.1 is the ordinary council meeting held 26 September 2023. I'm about to look for a mover and a seconder that the minutes of the ordinary council meeting held 26 September 2023 be taken as read and confirmed as a true and correct record. Could I have a mover, please? Councillor Brenda Abrandis, thank you. Someone to second? Councillor Navard, thank you. Councillors, does anyone oppose this? No. Okay, then I'll call that passed unanimously. We now move on to item 7.1.2, which is a minute amendment on Council Resolution 0523/096. And the motion is that the minutes of the ordinary council meeting held 23 May 2023 be amended as follows. And I'll read what that says. Council Resolution number 0523/096 be amended from this, that Council endorse the recommendation as contained within the confidential minutes. That's what it is, and it be changed to that Council, 1, not endorse the findings noted within the investigator's report of a breach of 9 open bracket D close bracket and 10 open bracket B close bracket of the Councillor Code of Conduct. Number 2, takes no further action with regard to this complaint other than 3 below. And point 3 is noting the complainant is no longer an employee of the city, then if possible request the CEO to provide a copy of this resolution to the complainant. The change goes on. Reason for decision different to officer recommendation. It is Council's belief that there were errors in the advice given to the Mayor at the meeting. Close quote. Mr. Adams, I might just give you an opportunity to give Council a little bit of background to that because it does relate to the previous Council.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. So there's some background underneath there, but essentially the amendment is to show that the council resolution that was made behind closed doors that actually appeared in the confidential report should appear as a public resolution. And so, you know, any decisions made behind closed doors are supposed to be made available to the public. So that's what we've been asked to do, to correct an error in the minutes whereby it was in the confidential report and not available for public viewing. That's essentially all it's about, to make the minutes compliant with the legislation and in line with the advice that we were provided from the Department of Local Government.
Thank you, Mr Adams. So I'm looking for someone to move that, well, I guess it's an officer recommendation. Is anyone willing to move that? Councillor Brenda Abrandis, thank you. Anyone to second? Councillor Navard, I think, was first there. Does anyone oppose this? Councillor Choi.
Sorry, Mr Mayor, yeah, I've just got a question. I thought it was just the names of the people who voted, not the actual full resolution that is made public from those meetings. Is that not correct? Or is that where we went wrong?
Who should I send that to? Mr Adams?
So confidential resolutions that are made behind closed doors are required to be made public. And given that this one also was different to the officer recommendation, the requirement is that the reason for it being given, being made different to the officer recommendation also has to be made public.
Thank you, Mr Adams. So, councillors, does anyone oppose this item? No. Then I'll use my powers under the standing orders to declare it carried. That brings us on to item 7.2, which is notes of briefing. So I'm going to call for someone to move that council notes the following council briefings and workshops were held. That's item 7.2.1, concept briefings and workshops, and 7.2.2, council agenda briefing, 25 October 2023. Can I have a mover, please? Councillor Coveney, thank you, and seconded by Councillor Brenda Abrandis. Does anyone oppose this? No. In that case, I'll use my powers under the standing orders to declare it carried. Okay, that brings us on to item 8, which is presentations. Item 8.1 is petitions, of which there is nil this evening. Item 8.2 is gifts or awards presented to council. That's nil this evening. Item 8.3 is deputations, and one deputation was heard at the council agenda briefing held on 25 October 2023. That brings us to item 9, which is method of dealing with agenda business. So I'm about to seek confirmation from the Chief Executive Officer, Mr Mike Bradford, that all the report items contained in tonight's agenda were discussed at the October Council agenda briefing. Mr Bradford.
That is correct, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Mr Bradford. So, with the exception of those items to be withdrawn for discussion, reports will be adopted by exception resolution. And by that, I mean that the officer recommendation will be adopted as is without any discussion or amendment. So the following items have been withdrawn for discussion this evening. The first is item 10.1.1, which is Collier Park Village request for proposal. And the reason that's been pulled out for the night is Councillor Andre Brenda Abrandis has an amended motion. Item 10.3.2, which is proposed amendment to approved use not listed, short-term accommodation, Lot 2, Unit 1 of Unit 1, 45 Mary Street, Como. And the reason for that is Councillor Bronwyn Moore has declared a proximity interest in this item and will need to leave the chamber for the debate and vote on that item. Item 10.4.1, Audit Risk and Governance Committee, has been pulled out. And the reason for that is, firstly, an absolute majority is required, and secondly, elected member appointments are required. Item 10.4.2, Chief Executive Officer Evaluation Committee, has been pulled out. Once again, the reason is an absolute majority is required for that item, and also we need to appoint elected members to those positions. Item 10.4.3, Rivers Regional Council, is being pulled out. The reason is elected member appointments are required. Item 10.4.4, City of South Perth Inclusive Community Advisory Group, has been pulled out. The reason is elected member appointments are required. Item 10.4.5, Perth Airports Municipalities Group, Inc., has been pulled out. The reason, once again, is elected member appointments are required. 10.4.6 is the City of South Perth Public Health Reference Group. The reason for this one being pulled out, once again, is elected member appointments are required. Item 10.4.7, City of South Perth Arts Advisory Group, has been pulled out. The reason is elected member appointments are required. Item 10.4.8, West Australian Local Government Association South East Metropolitan Zone, has been pulled out. The reason is elected member appointments are required. Item 10.4.9, Local Government Management Committee for Canning/South Perth delegates. Once again, the reason is elected member appointments are required. And item 10.4.10, appointment of community members to City of South Perth Audit, Risk and Governance Committee, because an absolute majority is required for that item. Councillors, are there any other items that anyone wishes to pull out for discussion and debate this evening? That's a no? Okay. In that case, for the balance of the reports, I'm going to call for a mover and a seconder to carry the following items by exception resolution. And that's item 10.1.2, City of South Perth Volunteer of the Year Awards, Assessments and Recommendations for 2023. Item 10.3.1, Draft Payment in lieu of Parking Plan. Item 10.3.3, Proposed 6 4-storey grouped dwellings, Lot 277, 120 Mary Street, Como, Section 31 reconsideration. Item 10.3.4, Draft Local Planning Policy P303, Design Review Panel and Draft Local Planning Policy P316, Developer Contribution for Public Art and Public Art Spaces, final adoption. Item 10.3.5, Draft Local Planning Policy, Heritage Conservation and Development, Advertising, and Local Planning Policy P313, Local Heritage Listing Revocation. Item 10.4.11, Listing of Payments September 2023, and item 10.4.12, Monthly Financial Statements September 2023. Could I have a mover for those items, please? Councillor Coveney, thank you. A seconder? Councillor Brenda Abrandis, thank you. Does anyone oppose any of these items being carried en bloc? Councillor Choi.
No, I don't oppose anything, Mr Mayor. Just a question. So you didn't mention 12.1, but I take it that's still going to be heard this evening?
That will be heard this evening, that's right. It's only items in item 10 that get carried en bloc.
Yeah, thank you.
Yep. All right, so we've had that moved by Councillor Coveney. We've had that seconded by Councillor Brenda Abrandis. Does anyone oppose? No. In that case, I use my powers under the standing orders to declare all of those items carried. For the benefit of those in the gallery and those listening via YouTube this evening, those items have all just been passed by exception resolution in accordance with clause 5.5 of the City of South Perth Standing Orders 2007, and the officer's recommendations have been accepted as is by council. So we'll now be moving on to the first of the reports that's been identified to be withdrawn for discussion this evening, and that is item 10.1.1, Collier Park Village Request for Proposal. So bear with me while I just get my notes open. So we do have an officer recommendation that's before us at the moment. I also understand that Councillor Brenda Abrandis has got an amended motion. So I guess I'll begin. Does anyone want to move the officer recommendation? I'll move that one. Does anyone wish to second? Councillor Waugh, thank you. All right. So, councillors, we've got an item before us that involves endorsing Amana Living Incorporated as the preferred proponent for the transfer of Collier Park Village, and also authorises the CEO to negotiate entering into a non-binding heads of agreement with Amana Living for the transfer of the ownership and operation of Collier Park Village. You've got the officer recommendation before all of you there. The city's operated Collier Park Village for over 30 years now, but in the time since Collier Park Village was first conceived of, built and initially operated by the City of South Perth, the needs and I suppose the sector of retirement villages has changed substantially. There's been a large number of local governments in the West Australian and I think probably nationally as well that have gradually divested themselves of their residential aged care and their retirement village holdings. And the reason for that is they're specialised industries that specialist providers of, in this case, a retirement village, will ultimately deliver a better standard of amenity for residents than what a local government can do when it's not their core business. For those councillors that have been on council for the journey, we've had a number of presentations. The residents have been kept informed of what's going along every step of the way. Amana Living have made a presentation to the village residents, which I understand was received very well. And in fact, we had a deputation from the president of the Collier Park Village Residents Association last week, saying that the village residents are, on the whole, are pretty happy with this proposal. It's a significant transaction. It's an important one to get right. It is in the early stages, admittedly, but I'm reluctant to do anything that I suppose changes the officer recommendation before us that has been crafted over a number of months and with a lot of work between Amana Living, the village residents, and also the City of South Perth administration. So I think this is a positive thing. I think it's a positive thing for the village residents and for the community at large. I endorse the officer recommendation to you. And Councillor Wall, if you'd like to say anything as seconder, you have the opportunity now. All right. So the officer recommendation has been moved. It's been seconded. I do understand that Councillor Brenda Abrandis has an amended motion, and if he would like to move his amended motion, I'll give him the opportunity to do so now.
Yep. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to move the amended motion.
All right, if you can please read the text of the amended motion, perhaps focus on paragraph 2 and make it clear when you're reading out the red text that that's the change you proposed.
Exactly. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The amended motion for Collier Park Village request for proposal that Council endorses Amana Living Incorporated being the preferred proponent for the transfer of Collier Park Village. 2, authorises the Chief Executive Officer to negotiate entering into a non-binding heads of agreement with Amana Living Incorporated for the transfer of ownership and operation of Collier Park Village, consistent with the criteria contained within the request for proposal for Amana Living Incorporated's response, amendment, and that the non-binding heads of agreement include the requirement for Amana Living Incorporated to prepare and have endorsed by Council a landscape plan that meets the intent of the vision to retain existing trees. End of amendment. Point 3, authorise the Chief Executive Officer and the Mayor to execute the land transfer documents to effect the transfer of the Collier Park Village site from the state to the city in conditional freehold title and to enable a retirement village memorial to be placed on the site.
Thank you, Councillor Brenda Abrandis. In a moment, I'll see if anyone wants to second your amended motion, but just because we do have a few new council members, I'm correct in saying that the text in red that's currently on our screens is your amendment?
Yes, that is correct, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Okay, does anyone wish to second Councillor Brenda Abrandis's amended motion? Councillor Navard. All right, Councillor Brenda Abrandis, your amended motion has been seconded. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you very much for indulging me with seconding this motion. Now, firstly, the consideration for the negotiations with the proponent include the city's priorities and values, detailed in the Strategic Community Plan 2021 to 2031. The city stipulated the following objective of Collier Park Village: a commitment to retain natural vegetation and tree canopy where practical, and or a plan detailing proposed plantings for all development stages. Proponents genuinely intend to retain the trees should not have any objections to the inclusion of reasonable conditions. Second reason, relying upon a development assessment, DA, to protect trees carries uncertainty and risks as a last-minute measure, as opposed to proactively protecting trees through an agreement. There is no guarantee that any trees would be saved under the DA process. The purpose of a landscape plan is to proactively identify trees of significant value to the community and residents, with clear expectations around preservation requirements of this space containing significant trees. A landscape plan will confirm the proponent's commitment to vegetation presentation and consideration for future development opportunities. This provides certainty for the community, residents, and the operation around vegetation protection, rather than being reliant upon the determination of a DA or a tree preservation order. 3, the proponent has confirmed a commitment to retain natural vegetation and tree canopy where practical. The natural environment has a direct impact on the health and well-being of individuals, and the significant mature trees are more vital to the current residents at Collie Park Village. A deputation confirmed the Collie Park Village residents' appreciation of the existing vegetation and water features, forming part of their daily recreating and enjoyment. Finally, the inclusion of the landscape plan or a detailed proposed plantings for all development stages was included as consideration as part of the request for proposal process. And for this reason, I'd like you to consider this amendment as being part of the process that we originally undertook. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Brenda Abrandis. Councillor Navard, you're seconder of the amended motion. Would you like to speak?
Briefly, thank you. Yes, I think this is just a way of demonstrating to people in our community that we're attempting to do the very best we can by the residents and also by community members who obviously are very keen on preservation of vegetation and trees as best we can manage. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Navard. I might ask a question at this point. I only received the amended motion this afternoon, so I guess this question is to Director Shaw, maybe, and the CEO, Mr. Bradford. Does the City Administration recommend that Council pass this amended motion? Ms. Shaw.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So the City's preference is, of course, to retain point 2 as per the officer's recommendation. And there's a few reasons for that. First of all, Council actually endorsed the returnable schedule that was contained within the request for a proposal document. And one of the items that was contained within that schedule is that respective proponents were requested to provide a plan outlining how the vegetation at Collier Park Village will be protected during the staged redevelopment process. In response to that, Amana Living has provided its response in their proposal and has since presented to the residents and to Council, and have clearly recognised the need to retain trees and the value of those trees. So from the City's perspective, no item that's contained within the returnable schedule of the request for a proposal otherwise has a greater level of importance, because all of the items contained within that document are important considerations that the City has considered when making the recommendation to present Amana Living as a preferred respondent. In terms of the wording provided, we've received positive feedback from the residents with respect to Amana Living being the City's preferred respondent, and we wouldn't be seeking to complicate any future negotiations with Amana in that respect, certainly given the fact that the proposal that was provided by Amana already indicated their intent to retain the trees across the site. In terms of some of the commentary around the development application process and the likelihood of retaining trees through that process, unlike single house applications that may otherwise be exempt from requiring a development application, the nature of this land use would trigger the need for a development application should Amana seek to do any sort of development on the site, regardless of the scale. And as part of that, there would then be a requirement for either the City Council or the Joint Development Assessment Panel to consider the requirements in the planning regulations with respect to the retention of trees. And as part of that, clause 67 of those regulations otherwise requires recognition of landscaping elements and any trees worthy of retention. And so for that reason, I'm satisfied that there's no imminent risk to losing the trees on the site, and certainly Amana hasn't indicated that that would be their intention.
Thank you, Ms Shaw. Mr Bradford, anything to add to that?
Not really, it's just that, as I recall, these recommendations were drafted in consultation with our legal advisors, and so carefully crafted to make sure that we were consistent with the future council decisions and processes that we need to embark upon. And so I'm cautious around making changes to those. And I would make the observation that given that we are still relatively early in the process with Amana, and there is a significant body of due diligence, that imposing a very prescriptive requirement right up front could increase the risk of the transaction proceeding in that kind of, which I think is could be a delicately poised due diligence process. So as Director Shaw stated, our preference is to retain the clause 2 as drafted by the officers.
Thank you very much. Councillors, is there anyone who would like to speak against the amended motion? I might say a few words. So, I haven't had time to prepare anything. I only received this amended motion relatively late this afternoon, but as a general principle, I'm very nervous about late amendments to significant motions before council that potentially could have unintended and undesired consequences. Changing the nature of the officer recommendation at this late stage on what is a very important transaction, I think adds an unnecessary element of risk to the recommendation before us. And I appreciate Ms Shaw and Mr Bradford providing their thoughts at relatively short notice there. But general principles, a late amendment doesn't really give the administration officers proper opportunity to properly advise council of the likely pros and cons of that late amendment, and it doesn't really give the elected members, the decision makers, enough time to think through the pros and cons of a relatively late amendment in the process. From what I understand from Ms Shaw, this would represent a significant amount of red tape and other hurdles for negligible environmental gain, from what I understand. And given that the tender conditions were very, very carefully crafted with the city's legal team, and also was the subject of workshops from the elected members at the time, I'm very reluctant to support something that changes the position at this late stage. So for that reason, I'm going to be voting against Councillor Brenda Brandis's amended motion, and I'll be supporting, hopefully, the unamended officer recommendation. That's me. Is there anyone who would like to speak in favour of Councillor Brenda Brandis's amended motion who hasn't spoken yet? Councillor Brenda Brandis, a question, I take it?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. So just with reference to the commitment made to retain natural vegetation and tree canopy where practical, and or a plan detailing proposed plantings for all development stages. There's obviously an indication that there is an and or a plan detailing proposed plantings. So I suppose the question I've got is, can you advise the significance that Amana Living placed on providing something which would be a plan with regard to vegetation, current vegetation, and also vegetation with regard to any proposed developments at all stages?
Ms Shaw, should I send that in your direction?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. So in terms of the returnable schedule, the specification that was required to be responded to. It was please provide a plan outlining how the vegetation at Collier Park Village will be protected during the staged redevelopment process. So it does not refer to a plan that otherwise provides for revegetation at the site, simply the retention of the existing vegetation at the site. So details were provided in the response by Amana Living as to their commitment to retain that vegetation on the site. And there were no details provided as to prospective development of that site, given that is unknown at this point in time. So there is effectively no plan to otherwise remove vegetation on the site, given there is no plan at this point in time to redevelop the site.
Thank you, Ms Shaw. Is there Councillor Brenda Brandis?
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and thank you, Director Shaw. Just a clarifying point. So with regard to the level of comfort that we've received in writing with regard to tree retention, it would be nothing specific at this point in time. Would that be fair to say?
Ms Shaw?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. So I do not believe there is any risk to the removal of the trees at this point in time.
Thank you, Ms Shaw. Is there anyone who hasn't already spoken? Councillor Choi?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I've just got a question. I know Dr Shaw's already covered probably a bit of this in response to your earlier question, but I'm just wondering if there's anything else that can be added in relation to how the city can ensure that the commitment that's been discussed can be maintained by any future operator or future developer into the future. Is there anything else that you, maybe Director Shaw or another officer hasn't covered yet?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I don't believe there is, and the reason being is because the existing wording of Part 2 of the officer's recommendation specifically says that they would be required to negotiate with the non-binding heads of agreement consistent with the request for a proposal, which is the vegetation retention that I mentioned earlier in the returnable schedule, and also consistent with Amana Living Incorporated's response, and that response didn't provide for the removal of vegetation. So as a result of those 2 points being included in Part 2, I'm satisfied that those matters would therefore be addressed in a non-binding heads of agreement that would otherwise shape a contract. In terms of any prospective redevelopment in the future, given the use of the site would otherwise require a development application, we can then use clause 67 to look at retaining the vegetation through that process. But it's difficult to comment on that given there are no plans to redevelop the site at this point in time.
Thank you, Ms Shaw. Councillors, is there any... Councillor Brenda Brandis, another question?
Yes, thank you, Mr Mayor. I've got a couple more questions. Just with regard to the reference to the significant amount of red tape that might be incurred in undertaking this as an amendment, could I just have a bit of an indication as to how much additional work would be undertaken if a landscape plan was to be provided and considered?
Ms Shaw?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. So I think the first point would be that Amana Living would obviously be required to engage a suitably qualified landscape architect to prepare a landscape plan. Typically, a landscape plan would include elements such as species type, an evaluation of all of the existing vegetation on the site, as well as any irrigation provided throughout the site. So Amana would arguably need to undertake that level of review over the site. Following which the wording of the amended motion includes the requirement for the landscape plan to be endorsed by council, which would indicate that the city would obviously then undertake an assessment of that landscape plan to see if it's satisfactory before preparing reports to council for that to be considered. So that body of work would need to be undertaken, assuming that would need to be undertaken prior to the non-binding heads of agreement being finalised, which would otherwise impact the timing in terms of drafting of a potential contract for the transfer of the land.
Thank you, Ms Shaw. And another question, Councillor Brenda Brandis?
Yes, thank you, Mr Mayor. Two more questions. Just with regard to the level of protection we're obviously seeking here, so this would be through an agreement, through a contract that we sort of enter into for part of the divestment. Would that not be a better outcome as opposed to a tree preservation order or a development application, which obviously we might not have a lot of control over?
Ms Shaw?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So my opinion would be that the development application would be the most suitable process. The reason being is because at that point in time, we can undertake an assessment of not only the health of the trees at that point in time, and as I mentioned earlier, at this point in time, there are no plans to redevelop the site. So, for example, it could be 15 years into the future, at which point in time the health of those trees might be substantially different to what's there at the time. We can also consider tree protection zones around the trees in relation to any building footprint that could be proposed. And again, because we don't know the location of potential buildings, if any, we can't provide that level of assessment at this point in time that would otherwise be suitable when considering a landscape plan. In terms of the tree preservation orders, the concern with that is simply that the tree preservation order itself is simply a mechanism that otherwise requires a development application to trigger the assessment of the trees itself. And as I mentioned earlier, given the use of the land for retirement living, it would trigger the need for a development application anyway. So given there's already a requirement to obtain a development application and associated assessment of the trees, that would effectively be acting the same as what a tree preservation order would otherwise provide for. In terms of the tree preservation orders themselves, if an order was made over a tree, it also requires the landowner to then seek approval to otherwise prune, cut or remove a tree on the site. And that can become problematic from a liability issue if the city was not responding in time to grant that request to otherwise maintain that tree. And so for that reason, in addition to the fact that a development application would otherwise be required, it would be my advice that the concerns that have been raised in relation to retaining trees can otherwise be addressed as part of the requirements into the contract and also as part of any future development application.
Thank you, Ms Shaw. And another question, Councillor Brenda Brandis.
Yes, thank you, Mr Mayor, and thank you, Director Shaw. Just with regard to tree preservation orders, so the liability that was noted, the first part of this question is, would that not be applicable to other trees that we actually also have responsibility for maintaining? And the second part of the question with regard to tree preservation orders, members of the community, would they be able to actually make a registration for a significant tree on the site, given that it's Crown land, and actually we would work through that process with the Crown being the owner, and would that change with regard to a change of ownership?
Yeah, Councillor Brenda Brandis, you're kind of veering away from the actual point of the amended motion here. Yes.
Sorry, Mr Mayor, we have spoken about tree preservation orders as part of the
That's not the point, Councillor Brenda Brandis. You've got an amended motion before us that talks about a landscape plan. Tree preservation orders aren't mentioned in your amended motion. You're sort of going off relevant territory at the moment.
We're discussing tree preservation and...
Councillor Brenda Brandis, your questions have got to be relevant to the amended motion before Council at the moment. It's not a case of just throwing open a really, really wide net and anything to do with trees we can phrase as a question. So I'm disallowing those questions.
Right, thank you, Mr Mayor. With regard to responding to the comments made by Director Shaw, though, with regard to tree preservation, would that not be appropriate? No, we're not debating tree preservation orders. We're debating your amended motion. That's what's before Council at the moment. So you've had a good crack at the whip, but those two questions, they're not relevant to what's before us at the moment. Okay, thank you.
All right. Councillors, is there anyone who wishes to speak in favour of Councillor Brenda Brandis's amended motion who hasn't already spoken? Is there anyone else who wishes to speak against Councillor Brenda Brandis's amended motion who hasn't already spoken? No. In that case, Councillor Brenda Brandis, you've got 5 minutes to rebut any arguments that have been made against your amended motion during this debate.
Okay, thank you, Mr Mayor. Okay, so firstly, the preservation of trees with regard to Collie Park Village is critical and important for the City of South Perth. We do have a relatively low canopy cover. We need to continue pursuing strategies to retain trees and canopy cover. including Collie Park Village, which has a significant canopy cover. We need to ensure that active measures are taken to retain the current form, and that this is for the benefit of not only the community and also the Collie Park residents, but also as habitat. Measures to retain this vegetation and significant trees only count as the loss through the ongoing infill and loss of tree canopy. Collie Park Village is a wonderful example of dense mature vegetation that provides a substantial canopy cover that requires retention. Measures such as this should be negotiated to ensure adequate protection is in place to prevent the city's canopy cover reduction. Where a development application is required, this doesn't mean that it will come back to council for a determination. It could mean that there's less visibility or no visibility at all with regard to trees and assessing the development application. It's for this reason that the identification of significant trees at Collie Park Village as part of this process would add an additional level of protection and certainty for the residents and the community. Consideration for the negotiation with the proponent includes the city's priorities and values, detailed in the Strategic Community Plan 2021 to 2031. The city stipulated the following objective of Collie Park Village: a commitment to retain natural vegetation and tree canopy where practical, and/or a plan detailing proposed plantings for all development stages. Proponents genuinely intending to retain the trees should not have any objection to the inclusion of reasonable conditions. This amendment includes a landscape plan that meets the intent of the vision to retain existing trees, which forms part of the city's priorities and values detailed in the Strategic Community Plan. I commend Council to support this amendment for a long-term benefit for the community and for the residents of Collie Park Village. Whilst there are no indications at this point of site redevelopment, as we've heard tonight, this is subject to change with regard to the change of any level of management. And at this point in time, we don't have any certainty with regard to preservation of the existing vegetation on Collie Park Village. So I ask for your consideration to support the inclusion of the landscape plan, which was part of consideration for this undertaking. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Brenda Abrandis. So just for the benefit, since we do have a new council, I'm about to put Councillor Brenda Abrandis's amended motion to the vote. This is solely a vote on Councillor Brenda Abrandis's amended motion, and depending on what happens with this vote, then we'll go back to either the original officer recommendation or the officer recommendation as amended by Councillor Brenda Abrandis's amended vote. But this vote is just about Councillor Brenda Abrandis's amended motion. So with that, councillors, please cast your votes. All right, so the votes have been cast. Councillor Brenda Abrandis's amended motion has been defeated 3 votes to 6. And for the benefit of those who are listening via YouTube, I'll just get the screen with who voted which way. Here we go. So those who voted in favour of Councillor Brenda Abrandis's amended motion were Councillor Brenda Abrandis, Councillor Choi and Councillor Navard. Those who voted against were myself, Mayor Greg Milner, Councillor D'Souza, Councillor Ward, Councillor Cridland, Councillor Prendeville and Councillor Coveney. Okay. So the amended motion has been defeated. Now we're going back to the officer recommendation in its unamended form, so just as it appears on page 11 of the agenda. I've spoken, Councillor Waugh has spoken. Is there anyone who wishes to speak against the officer recommendation who hasn't already spoken? And it's okay if you've spoken during the amended motion. It's just if you've already spoken on the substantive motion yet. So no one to speak against the officer recommendation. Is there anyone else who wishes to speak in favour of the officer recommendation? Councillor Choi?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, I'm going to speak in favour of the officer recommendation, and I just want to thank the city for its due diligence and its smooth operation, I guess, of getting us to this point. It was not an easy task. So I just want to thank the officers and also the residents committee that came along last week and made the deputation. I really appreciated that and found that very helpful. So thank you as well for coming along. And yes, and also to the council. I think well done. We did our workshops. We did quite a lot of discussion and due diligence during those workshops as well. And I just think we should all give ourselves a pat on the back for where we've got to with that. So yes, I will be supporting the officer recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Choi. Anyone else wishes to speak either for or against the officer recommendation? No. Well, ordinarily I'd have 5 minutes to sort of rebut any arguments made against, but since there haven't been any arguments made against, I'll simply put this item to the vote. So councillors, we're now voting on the officer recommendation as it appears at page 11 of the agenda. Please cast your votes. And that was passed unanimously. Thank you, councillors. So we now move on to the next item to be withdrawn for discussion this evening. That's item 10.3.2, proposed amendment to approved use not listed, short-term accommodation, Lot 2, Unit 1, 45 Mary Street, Como. Councillor Waugh has declared a proximity interest in this item, so we'll just give Councillor Waugh an opportunity to vacate the chamber for the duration of this item. All right, Councillor Waugh has just left the chamber. So we have an officer recommendation before us on this item. I haven't received any alternative motions or amended motions on this item. So in that case, I'm going to ask if anyone wishes to move the officer recommendation. And I guess I'll move it. Is anyone willing to second the officer recommendation? Councillor Cridland, thank you. Nothing to say. I've got nothing to say, councillors. The officer recommendation seems to be all in order. I'm not aware of any objections from any of my fellow councillors. Councillor Cridland, anything further to say?
I think you've said it all.
All right, thank you. Does anyone wish to speak against the officer recommendation? No. In that case, I'll simply use my powers under the standing orders to declare the item carried unanimously. And would someone please like to fetch Councillor Waugh back? Welcome back, Councillor Waugh. So we're now moving on to item 10.4.1, which is Audit, Risk and Governance Committee. An absolute majority is required for this one. I understand from governance that we have had nominations from myself, from Councillor Glenn Cridland, from Councillor Andre Brendera-Brandis and Councillor Waugh to be appointed to the Audit, Risk and Governance Committee. I'm happy to move a motion to that effect. So I move a motion that in accordance with the officer recommendation text there, that in accordance with the provisions of the Local Government Act 1995, section 7.1 capital A, the following councillors be appointed to the Audit, Risk and Governance Committee for the period 31 October 2023 to 18 October 2025. And they are Mayor Greg Milner, Councillor Glenn Cridland, Councillor Andre Brender-Abrandis and Councillor Bronwyn Waugh. Is anyone willing to second that motion? Councillor D'Souza, thank you. Councillors, I can't sort of declare this one as carried because it requires an absolute majority. Is there anyone who wishes to speak against that motion? By all means.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just got a question. Did you say there were 5 nominees?
No, 4. So myself, Councillor Cridland, Councillor Brender-Abrandis and Councillor Waugh.
And they've all been put forward? That's the resolution, that we adopt all 4 of those people on that committee? There's 4
Yes,
positions?
that's the motion I'm moving.
Sorry,
Yep.
I misheard then. Thank you.
All right. So that was Councillor Waugh, were you the seconder there? I'm having a seniors moment. Councillor D'Souza, my apologies. All right. Is there anyone who wishes to speak either for or against that notice of motion? No. Well, I won't say anything by way of winding up. I'll simply put that item to the vote. And that was unanimous. Thank you, councillors. And that satisfies the requirement for an absolute majority. We now move on to item 10.4.2, which is Chief Executive Officer Evaluation Committee. I understand that nominations have been received from myself, Mayor Greg Milner, Councillor Glenn Cridland, Councillor Hayley Prendeville, Councillor Nick Coveney and Councillor Bronwyn Waugh, so 5 councillors there. I'm happy to move a motion using the language of the officer recommendation that in accordance with the provisions of the Local Government Act 1995, sections 5.10 and 5.11, the following councillors be appointed to the Chief Executive Officer Evaluation Committee for the period 31 October 2023 to 18 October 2025. Could I have a seconder, please? Councillor Prendeville, thank you. So that's been moved and seconded. Councillors, is there anyone who wishes to speak either for or against? No? Then I'll simply put that to the vote. All right, that was passed unanimously. Thank you again. That satisfies the requirement for an absolute majority. We now move on to item 10.4.3, which is Rivers Regional Council. We have received 4 nominations, so myself, Councillor Blake D'Souza, Councillor Hayley Prendeville and Councillor Andre Brender-Abrandis. I have had the opportunity to speak with Councillor D'Souza, Councillor Prendeville and Councillor Brender-Abrandis prior to this item. I'm going to propose that we use the language of the officer recommendation, that the council appoints the following members to the Rivers Regional Council for the period 31 October 2023 to 18 October 2025. The primary delegates be myself and Councillor D'Souza, and that council appoints Councillor Hayley Prendeville as deputy delegate for myself, Mayor Greg Milner, and that council appoints Councillor Andre Brender-Abrandis as deputy delegate for Councillor D'Souza. I'll look for a seconder and then I'll give my reasons. Councillor Coveney, thank you. So the reason I've chosen to go down that path, councillors, is simply because the Rivers Regional Council isn't expected to survive beyond March or April of next year. I've served on Rivers Regional Council as a deputy delegate since 2017 and I think as a full delegate since either 2018 or 2019. And Councillor D'Souza has previously served as deputy and is familiar with the Rivers Regional Council and is able to sort of step into the breach, as it were, at short notice. So that's why I've suggested that myself and Councillor D'Souza be the primary delegates and why Councillor Hayley Prendeville and Andre Brender-Abrandis be the deputy delegates. With that, is there anyone, I should say, Councillor Coveney, is there anything that you'd want to say either for or against? No. Does anyone want to speak either? Councillor Choi.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a clarification, because I know we are in optional preferential voting mode this year with committee member appointments, I believe, as well as all other appointments. can I just double check the procedure with regards to that system and the delegate versus deputy delegate situation that you've just outlined?
Ms Fry, can I send that your way?
You can. It doesn't apply to these sorts of committees.
Thank you. So with that, is there anyone who wishes to speak either for or against the notice of motion I've just set out? No. Okay, then I'll simply put that to the vote. And that was unanimous. Thank you, councillors. We now move on and, it doesn't require an absolute majority. So we now move on to item 10.4.4, which is the City of South Perth Inclusive Community Advisory Group. We have received one nomination from Councillor Hayley Prendeville. That was the only nomination, so I'm happy to move, using the language of the officer recommendation, a motion that Council appoints Councillor Hayley Prendeville to the Inclusive Community Advisory Group for the period 31 October 2023 to 18 October 2025. Can I have a seconder, please? Councillor D'Souza, thank you. I've got nothing to say. Councillor D'Souza, anything to say? Does anyone wish to speak either for or against the notice of motion? No? Then I'll simply put it to the vote. And that was unanimous. Thank you, councillors. We now move on to item 10.4.5, which is the Perth Airports Municipalities Group, Inc. We're seeking, according to the officer recommendation, we're seeking a primary delegate and a deputy delegate, but as of yet there have been no nominees. Does anyone wish to put their hand up for either the delegate or the deputy delegate role? No, okay. Does that mean that this item just lapses for the time being, Ms Fry? Okay, so 10.4.5 lapses for the time being. That brings us to item 10.4.6, which is the City of South Perth Public Health Reference Group. Once again, we're looking for one delegate, but we haven't received any nominations as of yet. Does anyone wish to put their name forward as the delegate for the City of South Perth Public Health Reference Group? And that's a no for the time being, so, so item 10.4.6 will also lapse. We move on to item 10.4.7, which is the City of South Perth Arts Advisory Group. We need two delegates, and I've received nominations from Councillor Nick Coveney and Councillor Hayley Prendeville. So I'm happy to move a motion using the language of the officer recommendation that Council appoint the following councillors to the City of South Perth Arts Advisory Group for the period 31 October 2023 to 18 October 2025. Those councillors are Councillor Nick Coveney and Councillor Hayley Prendeville. Can I have a seconder, please? Councillor Waugh, thank you. I've got nothing additional to say. Councillor Waugh? No, okay. Does anyone wish to speak either for or against that notice of motion? No, I'll simply put it to the vote then. And that was unanimous. Thank you, councillors. Moving on to item 10.4.8, which is the Western Australian Local Government Association South East Metropolitan Zone. We're looking for two delegates and one deputy delegate. I have received a nomination from Councillor Waugh for one of the two delegates. Is there anyone else that would like to put up their hands for the Wowga South East Metro Zone? Or the deputy? No. Okay. In the absence of any nominations for the time being, I'll move a motion using the language of the officer recommendation that Council appoints the following member to the Western Australian Local Government Association South East Metropolitan Zone for the period 31 October 2023 to 18 October 2025. That delegate is Councillor Bronwyn Waugh. Can I have a seconder, please? Councillor D'Souza, thank you. So I've got nothing to say further. Councillor D'Souza, anything to say? No, okay. Does anyone wish to speak either for or against that notice of motion? That's a no, then I'll simply put the item to the vote. And just waiting on one more vote there. Thank you. That was unanimous. Thank you all. That brings us to item 10.4.9, which is the Local Emergency Management Committee for Canning and South Perth. We're looking for 2 delegates, but as of yet, we haven't received any nominations. Does anyone wish to nominate from the floor? That's a no, so item 10.4.9 will lapse for the time being. That brings us to item 10.4.10, which is appointment of community members to City of South Perth Audit, Risk and Governance Committee. We do have an officer recommendation before us. I haven't received any alternative motions or amended motions, but I do note that this does have a confidential attachment. So if anyone wants to make reference or ask questions about what's in the confidential attachment, we may need to go behind closed doors. But for the time being, does anyone wish to move the officer recommendation? Councillor D'Souza, thank you. Seconded by Councillor Navard. Councillor D'Souza, anything to say?
I'll just say very generally, Mr. Mayor, without the need for confidentiality, I was very impressed with the calibre of candidates we attracted for this. I've sort of shared this these comments with the CEO, and I'm quite honestly quite surprised that people of this calibre would want to serve at a council committee level. So yeah, I'm very happy to support this these appointments.
Thank you. Councillor Navard, anything to say, seconder?
I'm very happy with the
All right, thank you.
place.
This one requires an absolute majority, so I'll ask if there's anyone that opposes the officer recommendation. No. Is there anyone else who wishes to speak in favour? No. There being no argument, Councillor D'Souza, no need for any winding up comments. I'll simply put the officer recommendation to the vote. And just waiting on one more vote there. Thank you. That was unanimous. So that concludes item 10. We move on to item 11, which is applications for a leave of absence. I have received a leave of absence application from Councillor Nick Coveney for the period of 3 November 2023 to 14 November 2023 inclusive. Does anyone else have a leave of absence application that they'd wish to submit? No. Okay. In that case, I'm about to call for someone to move a motion that the leave of absence application received from Councillor Nick Covey for the period of 3 November 2023 to 14 November 2023 inclusive be granted. Could I have a mover, please? Councillor D'Souza, thank you. And a seconder? Councillor Navard, thank you. Councillors, please cast your votes. And that was unanimous. Thank you. We now move on to item 12, which is motions of which previous notice has been given. We do have a notice of motion from Councillor Mary Choi entitled Community Safety and Crime Prevention Group, change to the terms of reference and membership. I see that we've got the original notice of motion from Councillor Choi appearing at page 74 of the agenda, but we also have a suggested alternative recommendation suggested by the administration at page 79. Councillor Choi, I'll ask if you'd like to move your motion, and if you can let us know whether you're moving the original notice of motion or the suggested alternative recommendation.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Look, I wish to move the suggested alternative recommendation.
Right, thank you. I'll just see if there's someone who wants to second that, and if so, I'll turn the floor over to you. Is there anyone that would like to second Councillor Choi's suggested alternative recommendation? Councillor Brenda Brandis, thank you. So just so everyone's on the same page, the motion we're considering is the suggested alternative recommendation appearing at page 79 of the agenda. Councillor Choi, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That Council agrees to amend the Community Safety and Crime Prevention Group terms of reference to include up to 4 council delegates to the membership and remove clause 7.
Yes, and sorry, you're reading the suggested alternative recommendation, Councillor Choi, or the original one? Because there's a point, there's a paragraph 2 to the suggested alternative. And just so you know, I've received two nominations for that committee, which is yourself and Councillor Brenda Abrandis. So if you wanted to move point 2 and slot in your own name there and Councillor Brenda Abrandis's name, you'd be welcome to do so.
Sorry, Mr Mayor. I've found that now. Yes, so do you want me to start again? With
Yeah,
reading
if you
out
wouldn't
my
mind,
motion?
thank you.
Thank you, just to, for clarity. That Council 1 notes the City agrees to amend the terms of reference for its Community Safety and Crime Prevention Group to include up to 2 elected member delegates to the membership. And 2, the Council appoints Councillor, sorry, Mr Mayor, I think you said the names?
Yourself and Councillor Brenda Abrandis.
Myself, Councillor Mary Choi and Councillor Brenda Abrandis to the Community Safety and Crime Prevention Group for the period 31 October 2023 to 18 October 2025.
All right, and just to check, Councillor Brenda Abrandis, you're happy with that as seconder? Councillor Choi, if you wanted to provide any reasons, you've got 5 minutes to do so.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. So firstly, most if not all city facilitated committees or groups have council delegates appointed to them. 2, the aim of the Community Safety and Crime Prevention Group under the current terms of reference is to provide the strategic focus to the city on community safety and crime prevention matters. 3 community members from the district form part of Community Safety and Crime Prevention Group as provided for under clause 3.1 of the group's terms of reference. It is understood the Mayor also attends the group's meetings from time to time, yet there is no council delegate. 4, as there is a strategic element to the Community Safety and Crime Prevention Group and ordinary committee members form part of the group, it is the view that the group is not just operational in nature. Nevertheless, the Local Emergency Management Group is a group that is mainly operational in nature, I believe, yet requires an elected member to not only form part of the group, but to also co-chair their meetings. Five, community safety and crime prevention is a matter of high public interest and is a primary ongoing concern for many residents and ratepayers throughout the district. Elected members get contacted by residents on these concerns regularly and likely more than any other group or committee elected members serve on as council delegate. As such, it is the view that council has a responsibility, or at minimum, councillors of the city's 4 wards should have the opportunity to be included as a member under council delegation to the city's Community Safety, Crime and Prevention Group. 6, a former community member of the group expressed concern that no councillors form part of it or attended the Community Safety and Crime Prevention Group meetings, given its importance to residents and the community interest. It was the view that perhaps councillors weren't interested or didn't understand the gravity of the community concern around crime and safety, as opposed to councillors not having the actual opportunity under council delegation to be included in the group's activities. 7, other local governments have council delegates appointed to the same or similar committees or groups. For example, the City of Stirling terms of reference for its Crime Prevention Advisory Group includes a minimum of 4 councillors. The City of Kalamunda terms of reference for its Community Safety and Crime Prevention Advisory Committee is 4 councillors, 1 from each ward where possible. The City of Wanneroo terms of reference for its Community Safety Working Group includes the Mayor and 4 councillors, 1 from each ward, plus deputy delegates for each ward. The Town of Cottesloe terms of reference for its Community Safety and Crime Prevention Committee also includes delegates. Some, if not all, of these committees or groups also publish their minutes of their meetings, thereby providing increased transparency and accountability around the committees or groups' objectives and outcomes to their community. The list goes on, that's just a few that I found and I thought I'd include here for reference. In fact, I could not find a local government whose equivalent Community Safety and Crime Prevention Group did not include council delegation. To me, this is the right time for council and the community to make this change ahead, well, it's now post the elections, when the new council has been sworn in and are being endorsed this evening to their relevant delegatory roles. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Choi. Councillor Brenda Abrandis, you're the seconder. Is there anything that you'd like to say?
Yeah, thank you, Mr Mayor. I consider this particular group to be quite important. Community safety and crime has been a major concern, in particular in the Manning ward, and I have had to deal with quite a few instances where concerned community members have raised issues with regard to their own personal safety. I am quite pleased that Councillor Choi has actually brought this to Council and also allowed for Council members to actually participate in the Crime and Safety Prevention Group. This is actually really quite critical and has become more prevalent over the last couple of years. Having first-hand involvement with a family member in the Como ward with crime in the last 2 months has also made this, brought this home and made it a major concern for me personally. So for that reason, I'm very supportive of this, and I hope that we do get a lot more interaction at a council level, and we are made aware of some of the issues with regard to transparency and also the accountability with regard to the group as to what we can actually achieve as outcomes. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Brenda Abrandis. Councillors, is there anyone who opposes this item? No. In that case, I'll simply use my powers under the standing orders to declare it carried. That's carried unanimously. We'll move on. Item 13 is questions from members. Item 13.1 is responses to previous questions from members taken on notice. That's nil. Item 13.2 is questions from members for the administration this evening. Are there any questions from Councillor Choi?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I have a few and these have been provided on notice. Or except maybe one or two. So I'll start, and if anyone else wants to then have a go, I'm happy to hand over the mic during my questions. So the first one is, given the community interest in the city's current dog review, can the city please advise where it is up to with its review and confirm that public consultation will be included as part of the review in any new or updated plan or local law in respect to dogs?
Now, is that Ms Fry?
Thank you. Through the chair, we currently have an internal working group, so we will be undertaking a council workshop, I think on the 4th of December it is, and then we will be looking at going out to community consultation probably around February, March of next year.
Thank you, Ms Fry. Your next question, Councillor Choi.
Thank you, Mr Mayor and Officer Fry. Given numerous residents have demonstrated a keen interest in the redevelopment of the state heritage listed former South Perth Police Station, can the city please confirm that the relevant overseer for the redevelopment is the Department of Planning, Lands and Heritage, due to the Civic Heart development being approved by the state and not council? Second part of that question is, does the city consider that the redevelopment of the heritage listed site is being undertaken in accordance with the approved plans?
Ms Shaw, should I send that your way?
Yes, thank you, Mr Mayor. That is correct. So the Heritage Council is the state government statutory advisory body on heritage. The Department of Planning, Lands and Heritage supports the Heritage Council in its functions in this respect. So the Heritage Council and by association the Department of Planning would be responsible for ensuring compliance with the development application plans and reviewing any inspections on the state listed property itself. The city has no role to play in that on the basis that the minister called in the application and determined that. Sorry, do you have part two?
Yes, thank you through the chair. Director Shaw. Yes, does the city consider that the redevelopment is I guess moving ahead according to plan?
Ms Shaw.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Yes, apologies for that. Yes, I've reviewed the approved plans for the Civic Heart proposal, which incorporated the former police station site as part of that. The development that's underway at the time is consistent with those plans, and so I have no reason to believe that the department would need to undertake a further inspection at this point in time.
Thank you, Ms Shaw. Your next question, Councillor Choi.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and again, Director Shaw. Just in relation to recycling and an article that was published recently about will your bin receive a happy or sad face? Does the city in its waste and recycling endeavours encounter significant issues with residents recycling bin use? And if so, what kind of issues and across what average percentage of bins on a regular basis, please?
Ms Anne Primo, should I send that your way?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. The last significant audit that the city conducted was in 2019, and it found that the recycling bin showed low levels of contamination, with only 2.5% being non-recyclables. In terms of the industry standard, that is a very low level of contamination.
Thank you, Ms Anne Primo. Next question, Councillor Choi.
Thank you, through the chair, Director Anne Primo. In relation to video live streaming, and there was a recent article in Perth Now, my questions are, how many listeners on average have tuned into the city's audio live streaming of ordinary council meetings over the past 12 months? And how does this number compare to in-person public gallery attendances?
Ms Fry?
Yes, thank you. On average, 11 live listeners have tuned into the city's council agenda briefings and ordinary council meetings over the past 12 months, and typically a similar amount would be present in the public gallery. So the highest number of concurrent live viewers has been 31 and the lowest has been 4.
Thank you. Your next question, please, Councillor Choi.
Thank you through the chair, Ms Fry. Has the video live streaming specifications under the new local government regulations as part of the recent reforms been announced?
Ms Fry, can I send that your way?
Yes, thank you. So the local government administration regulations have been updated, and that includes the requirements of broadcasting council meetings publicly.
Thank you, Ms Fry. Councillor Choi?
Thank you again through the chair, Ms Fry. So based on that then, will the city consider introducing video live streaming earlier than the legislative required date of 1 January 2025?
Ms Fry?
Yes, thank you. The city will be seeking quotes from suppliers to determine the cost and installation timeframes to ensure that it can meet the new requirements by the required deadline being 1 January 2025.
Thank you, Ms Fry. Any further questions, Councillor Choi?
Yes, thank you, Mr Mayor. I think I've just got one more. Now, I understand newly elected members here tonight were welcome to the council last week, and that retired councillor Cameron Knowles was granted an opportunity to say a few words, which is all wonderful, at his last council meeting last month. And I'm just wondering if anyone would like to, I guess, say a few words for any former sort of councillors that aren't here this evening or didn't get a chance to say a few words when they left.
I might take that one on notice, Councillor Choi. That's not actually on the item, and I didn't know you were going to ask that question previously, but the former councillors have all been acknowledged, if that's what you mean. Councillors, does anyone else have any other questions to ask the administration this evening? Councillor D'Souza.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I've got 3 questions. The first question relates to a council request I lodged in June, July of this year on behalf of Mr Ivan Sarich of Salter Point. He basically was asking for a traffic coupling device to be installed on Hog Avenue in Salter Point. The admin replied saying there would be traffic studies needing to be done, but I haven't heard any further response for that. Happy for it to be taken on notice, but can I please get some sort of response on that one?
Who should I send that one to? Ms Zamprimo, thank you.
Yeah, if you would mind sending me the request details, I can look up that one up and follow up for you.
Thank you, Ms Zamprimo. It's also come to my attention that there's a new DA being lodged in Salter Point along Letchworth Centre, which is to potentially, I think, add an extra story for the existing cafe there. Can I just clarify if this will come to council? Because I've been getting quite a bit of concern locally about that.
Thank you. Ms Shaw?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Yes, there is a development application in for an extension to the existing cafe at that premises. We have received submissions for that. However, the city does have delegation to determine that application.
Thank you, Ms Shaw. Councillor Cridland, did I see your hand go up there?
Yes, thank you, Mr Mayor. I've got 3 questions, and they're all about Mill Point Ward. Now, Sir James Mitchell Park is one of the diamonds in South Perth, and one of the most popular parts of it for the people who aren't so fortunate to live overlooking it every day is to go down and go to the food vans and perhaps have a glass of wine down there. I was wondering when the streets, food vans will be restarting, if they haven't already? And will their operating hours and dates be the same as previous years? That's my first question.
Who should I send that to? Officers?
I think I'm pretty certain that they start on the 16th of November and that it goes through to early April. That is pretty well consistent with the same period last year. I also understand that the trading days and hours are the same as last year.
Thank you, Mr Bradford. Councillor Cridland?
Yep, thank you very much again. Sir James Mitchell Park, we've had some wonderful concerts down there, and we used to have wonderful Australia Day celebrations on the 26th of January when the fireworks happened. I was wondering, are there any Australia Day resident celebrations being planned by the city for Sir James Mitchell Park?
Who should I send that to? Is it Ms Shaw or?
Yes, thank you, Mr Mayor. Yes, the city's events team is currently planning an event similar to what was undertaken last year, so on the 26th.
Thank you. And my final question is, I happened to be watching commercial TV this week and I saw an electric hydrofoil surfboard being operated in the Swan River. And it was being operated from the beach just to the east of the Narrows Bridge. The article was very positive. However, the person who was running the particular, I'm not sure what you would call it, the business, complained about local government being difficult and not supportive. I had no idea whether he was referring to us in South Perth, given that that's where it was being filmed, or whether he was just having a whinge generally about local governments. And I hadn't seen it operating from there before until I saw it on TV. So I'm just wondering, is it licensed like the Fun Cats? Is it new? Without getting into detail, are we having difficulties?
Ms Shaw or Mr Bradford?
Yep, thank you, Mr Mayor. So yes, it's for the e-foil operator. Part of the requirements following the expression of interest for the use of that site was that the city enter into the licence agreement with the applicant for a 1-year term plus 4 subsequent 1-year renewal options, and that there'd be special conditions included in that licence that the operator would be otherwise required to comply with maritime safety regulations and obtain a permit from the Department of Biodiversity, Conservation and Attractions, and that may explain the perceived red tape.
Thank you, Ms Shaw. All right. Councillors, any further questions? Councillor Choi.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Just find the question. Had it here, now I lost it. It was just in relation to that item at sorry, I've got to bring it up again now. That minute amendment, 7.1.2. I'm just wondering if councillors were able to get a copy of that department advice, please, that the city received.
Mr Adams? I didn't see a reference to... Which advice are you referring to, Councillor Choi?
In reference to item 7.1.2, the minute amendment for the council resolution, and I believe the city had received advice from the department, so I'm just wondering if we could get a copy of that, please.
Who should I send that to?
We'll have a look and see what the advice was and if it can be provided.
All right, thank you. Any further, Councillor D'Souza?
Just again on the Salter Point DA, is it purely a DA or is it also a change of use? Because some of the residents around the area seem to think that the initial sort of granting of commercial or use as a cafe was was invalid. I don't know if that's the case. Just want to check if it's purely a DA or it's a change of use.
Ms Shaw.
Yes, thank you, Mr Mayor. So technically a change of use application is a development application and they're assessed in the same manner. So there was an original development application that was approved which provides for the occupation of that tenancy and the use itself, and this application seeks to extend the floor space for the continued use as a cafe. So there are no conditions within the delegation that would otherwise require that matter to be presented to council, and therefore the city can determine that application under delegation. But I do note that we will and are required to have regard to any submissions received during the course of public consultation on that application.
Thank you, Ms Shaw. Councillors, any further questions for the administration this evening? No? Okay. That brings us to item 14, which is new business of an urgent nature introduced by decision of the meeting. That's nil this evening. And item 15 is when we would close the meeting to the public if there was any requirement to do so, but there's no requirement to do so this evening. That brings us to item 16, which is closure. But before I close tonight's meeting, I'd like to thank everyone for their attendance and participation. I declare this meeting closed at 7:54 p.m. Thank you all and good night.